Sometimes called the Queen's Birthday Parade, Trooping the Colour has been a tradition of British infantry regiments since the 17th century, although the ceremony's roots go back much further. Since 1748, Trooping the Colour has marked the official birthday of the British sovereign and coincides with publication of the Birthday Honours List. Held annually on Horse Guards Parade, London, on the second Saturday in June, this colourful pageant is the ceremonial review for the Household Division, of which Her Majesty the Queen is Colonel-in-Chief. An integral part of the Household Division, and one of the most prestigious ceremonial regiments in the British Army, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery is the mounted ceremonial saluting battery of Her Majesty's household troops. Stationed at St John's Wood Barracks since 1947, the King's Troop is responsible for firing royal salutes in Hyde Park or Green Park on both royal anniversaries and state occasions. Trained to drive a team of 6 horses that each pull one of the 13-pounder state saluting guns, all the King's Troop soldiers are superb equestrians. The public knows little of the hard work behind the scenes that's necessary for the King's Troop to participate in special occasions such as Trooping the Colour. Many hours of hard work and training are put in all through the year in preparation for the royal salutes and state ceremonial events. And for 1 month each summer, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery performs the duties of the Queen's Lifeguard. Aside from their ceremonial duties though, the King's Troop, also known as the Troop, is a mobilised unit of trained fighting soldiers, serving in operational theatres around the world, providing support to artillery units on the battlefield. Although the practice of firing royal salutes with a horse artillery battery from the St John's Wood Barracks can be traced back to the early 1880s, the King's Troop is actually a very young military organisation in comparison to the rest of the British Army. At the beginning of the Second World War, the peacetime practice of firing royal salutes stopped, and the last horse artillery battery stationed at St John's Wood, K Battery, changed from horse-drawn artillery to vehicles. With the war over, King George VI requested the reinstatement of the royal salutes with a traditionally dressed horsed artillery battery which was to be based in London. In response, the riding troop of the Royal Horse Artillery was configured. Originally based in Shoebury-Ness, the riding troop marched into St John's Wood Barracks later that year, firing all the royal salutes in 1946 and the first part of 1947. But on the 24th of October 1947, the riding troop's fate changed. The King visited the St John's Wood Barracks to inspect the horses and soldiers on parade. Then, in discussion with a number of other officers who were with him, King George VI decided that the riding troop should be known as the King's Troop, and amending the visitor's book in his own hand, struck out the word riding, instead inserting King's. The King's Troop has been at the heart of British ceremonial life ever since. Upon the accession of Queen Elizabeth II to the throne in 1953, the King's Troop would have changed to the Queen's Troop, but Her Majesty declared that the name the King's Troop would remain in honour of her father. Within the Royal Artillery structure, posting between the Royal Artillery and the Royal Horse Artillery is fairly common, However, the Royal Horse Artillery regiments are perceived as elite, and a posting to an RHA unit is regarded as a career advancement. As well as being responsible for state and royal salutes, the King's Troop, sometimes known as the Horse Gunners, takes part in the Remembrance Sunday service and the Lord Mayor's show. The troop also performs the wonderfully impressive musical drive at county and agricultural shows throughout the country. The techniques and traditions of the tack room have been handed down generation to generation. And although being shown what to do is essential, the troop also need to work at speed. Unfortunately, there's no fast way to avoid the thousands of hours of love and dedication required to maintain the troop's high standards. The King's Troop has two types of riding equipment: best kit and a working and rehearsal kit. The best kit is used only for ceremonial and state occasions, such as the Queen's Birthday Parade. Although the saddles and nosebands of the best kit are as shiny as patent leather would never withstand the rigors of the ceremonial gun team. To ensure the kit remains in superb condition, everything is regularly cleaned, even when not in use, and just like soldiers' boots, the deep sheen on the leather is achieved through spit, polish, and sheer hard work. When the troop takes delivery of new saddles, they look much the same as any leather saddle for sale in tack shops. The first thing to be done is to use wire wool to open up the pores on the leather. This enables the polish to be absorbed, but this is not a fast process, and it takes 2 or 3 years to reach a polish level good enough for a ceremonial saddle. Most of the saddles, though, are about 15 years old, and the years of dedicated polishing and hard work quite literally shine through. The saddles are not just highly polished for show, though. There's a genuine reason for the finish. Driving a gun team requires a lot of energy, and without the flexibility within the saddle, the leather would wear extremely quickly. Constructed of wood, metal, and leather, the saddles are designed to distribute weight evenly across the horse's back, and the wooden sections of the saddle help to do this. Although most saddles can be used on any of the King's Troop horses, a few have dedicated saddles which are packed up with foam to provide a better fit for the horse. The King's Troop consists of 168 people. Working in a wide variety of roles, they represent every service necessary to keep the troop operational. As well as those who care for the horses, the King's Troop employs saddlers, farriers, clerks, tailors, storemen, vehicle drivers and orderlies. But no matter what their job, everyone has to learn to ride. Upon joining the troop, soldiers usually spend their first 18 months working with the horses in the lines. During this time, they're trained in stable management and horsemanship, and depending upon their abilities, the best are selected for training to ride on parade. After passing the recruit's ride stage, the soldiers have a chance to ride out on exercise in the morning, with each person allotted a team of horses to look after in the stables. Although some knowledge of horses and riding is desirable before joining, this is not an essential requirement. A keenness to learn, a fondness for horses, and a willingness to work the long hours required to care for the horses are far more important. After the initial 18 months, soldiers can move into specialist areas, depending upon their abilities and wishes. Some continue to work directly with the horses and become stablemen responsible for feeding the horses. Others progress to riding in the gun team as mounted gunners and are given further riding and horsemastership instruction. Some become limber gunners who look after the guns, whilst others choose to work within the associated trades. But with a limited number of positions available, individuals must go through a selection process. No matter what role the soldiers choose to pursue, all have the chance to continue to ride and compete regularly. soldiers can be found feeding, grooming, exercising and checking the horses even in the quiet hours of New Year's Day and Christmas Day. But maintaining the guns and riding equipment is also very time-consuming. A King's Troop soldier must be dedicated and devoted, because the men and women of the King's Troop have to work hard, very hard. Almost all of the horses in the King's Troop come from Southern Ireland, although some are brought in from Wales. The majority are purchased at 5 or 6 years old, so that their bone structure has developed enough for them to work in the gun teams straight after training. Sometimes the horses have never had a bit in their mouths or a saddle on their backs, so the newcomers are broken in or hacked by a specialist team of troop soldiers and instructors at the Defence Animal Centre in Melton Mowbray, Leicestershire. The horses are slowly introduced to military equipment and harness work, and during this period are known as remounts. This initial breaking in process takes between 10 and 12 weeks, after which the horses are taken to St John's Wood for further training, usually arriving just before Christmas each year. The gun horses' names are chosen to begin with the same letter as that of the commanding officer's surname at the time the horse was purchased. Given names such as Colonel Chatterbox and the Duke of Dazzleton, they also have a nickname which is used in the stables on a daily basis. The names are unique to each horse and are never used twice. Once the commanding officer has seen the remounts in harness in at least 2 musical drive rehearsals, and providing the horses are proficient enough, they will have their manes removed with clippers. This process is known as hogging. Much the same as passing Phase 2 training for a soldier, hogging is the remounts equivalent of passing out. Part of the horses' military training includes their being taught to jump, but only once the horses have satisfactorily taken their place on parade are those that show promise trained further to take part in civilian jumping competitions. Once the horses have reached retirement age, which is usually when they're around 15 years old, they're often rehomed by ex-troop personnel. Having spent at least 10 years working in the gun teams, pulling the 1.5-ton gun carriages, sometimes at speed, the horses enjoy their retirement. Chargers ridden by the officers must stand taller than 17.2 hands. The manege used for lessons and exercises is an enclosed surfaced rectangular area. This particular manege has been in use by various cavalry units since 1825. Halved in size in 1876, the Royal Horse Artillery Unit moved in 1880. The manege is traditionally marked with lettered points around the perimeter. The centre line runs from A to C, but why the letters are laid out in such an odd fashion is unknown. The quarter lines, or 3/4 lines, run halfway between the centre line and the wall. The midline is the short centre line, and the diagonals are described as long if they're ridden from corner to corner. The angled mirrors on the walls help riders ensure that they're maintaining the correct riding positions. The farriers provide an essential service to the troop, and their job is very physically demanding. Training as blacksmiths initially, farriers learn to handle blacksmith tools and develop the skills and techniques necessary for creating and shaping horseshoes. The learning process for a farrier extends far beyond that of a blacksmith. The farrier must develop an in-depth knowledge of horse anatomy and foot disease. A farrier is responsible for the trimming, shoeing, health and overall well-being of the horse's feet. Before beginning to shoe, the farrier removes the old shoes using pincers known as shoe pullers and trims the insensitive part of the hoof wall to the desired length with nippers. Shoes do not allow the hoof to wear down as it naturally would in the wild, so if the excess hoof isn't trimmed, the bones will become misaligned, which would place stress on the legs of the animal. Hot shoeing can be more time-consuming and requires a forge, but usually these shoes provide a better individual fit, Next, the farrier trims the sole and frog of the hoof with a hoof knife. The hoof is anatomically similar to the human fingernail, although much larger and thicker. Attached onto the palmar surface of the hoof, the farrier then nails the shoes on by driving the nails into the insensitive hoof wall. The nails are shaped in such a way that they bend outwards as they're driven in, avoiding the sensitive inner part of the foot, and emerge on the sides of the hoof. The farrier cuts off the sharp points. Shoeing, when performed correctly, causes no pain to the horse. Horses' hooves can become quite worn out when subjected to the added weight and stress of pulling a gun carriage, so correct shoes and foot care are essential. Stabled horses need exercise every single day, and a special surface track has been installed at the barracks to ensure that the horses can be comfortably exercised. A 4-figure army number is branded onto the front hoof, and a 2- or 3-figure troop-specific number is branded onto the rear right hoof of all the horses by the farriers. But as the hoof wall grows, these numbers have to be reburnt. Hoof oil is used to keep the horse's hooves in good condition and healthy, but it's also used for shiny hooves when on parade. Standing on the near side of their horse, the reins are put over the horse's head and neck. The bit is then inserted into the horse's mouth, and the headpiece is placed over the ears. From the front, the bit, noseband and browband are checked to ensure the bridle is level and free of twists. Standing by the horse's near side shoulder, the saddle cloth is placed above the horse's withers and moved back into position by sliding it with the horse's hair and not against it. Using both hands, the saddle is lifted into place so that the pommel is resting just behind the withers. The saddle cloth is pulled up into the saddle arch to avoid pressure on the withers. On the offside, the girth is taken down from the seat of the saddle and the saddle cloth and underflaps are checked. Returning to the near side, the girth is fastened gradually and evenly on both near and offside buckles. Soldiers are encouraged to compete on army horses in eventing, show jumping, mounted skill at arms and other horse trials to improve the performance of both horse and rider on parade. The troop has had many successes, and there have been a number of well-known horses and riders, including several Olympic champions. Currently, over a third of the King's Troop horses take part in horse shows and events throughout the UK. So named 13-pounders because of the weight of the shot fired, these 1.5-ton quick-firing field guns came into service in 1904 and all saw action in the First World War. The guns were advanced technology when in service. New at the time was the recuperating mechanism along the top of the barrel, which is wrapped in rope for cooling, but today requires a lot of maintenance to keep in pristine condition. The King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery provides the black horses and gun carriages for state and military funerals, including that of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. The gun carriage used as a hearse is a 20th century precedent, at least for the royal family. Prior to that, the hearse was a horse-drawn vehicle bedecked with heavy funereal artifacts. It was Queen Victoria in 1901 who was given the first of the so-called modern state funerals, with the gun carriage as the centerpiece. Queen Victoria's gun carriage was pulled by horses from the royal household, but the Royal Horse Artillery took over this role at Edward VII's funeral. A brass plaque is fixed to each gun carriage following use in a state or military funeral. On the 6th of September 1997, F subsection provided the gun carriage and team of black horses as escort to Diana, Princess of Wales's coffin when transported from Kensington Palace to Westminster Abbey. The gun and limber is pulled by 3 pairs of horses, called the lines horses. They're between 15-2 and 16-2 hands high, and are placed in 3 categories: lead, center, and wheel horses. The front pair are the leaders. They're taller, more bold, athletic horses, which act as the accelerator. The center pair of horses are slightly smaller. They add extra draft power and keep the traces off the ground. The final pair are the wheel horses, also known as wheelers, that act as the brakes of the team. They're usually quite thick-set, strong, powerful animals, as they're required to stop the 1.5-ton gun behind them. The horses are selected to conform in terms of size and color with the existing horses in the subsection. These colors range from the bright bay of A subsection to the black horses in F subsection. Thousands upon thousands of hours of dedication and sheer hard work are necessary to produce the stunning standard of presentation delivered by the King's Troop. The planning of events is timed to the smallest detail too. The troop cannot afford to be late for their major public events. Prior to departure, the 6 subsections line up with their 6 guns on the parade ground. The effect of a daily good grooming is readily recognized in the bright, clean and healthy appearance of the coat. Short and glossy coats, as a general rule, indicate good grooming and careful, stable management. The horses, mounted gunners, bridles, saddles and guns are checked. Again and again by section leaders, NCOs and officers. Nothing should be out of place by the time the King's Troop's commanding officer carries out his final checks.
Captain Jelly's on it.
Although women have only been able to join the King's troops since 1996, a third of all soldiers at gunner rank are female. Once the CO is happy with the turnout of his men and women, the King's troop are ready to depart. Escorted by both motorcycle and horse-mounted police, the long, slow cavalcade makes its way through the streets of St. John's Wood en route for Hyde Park to undertake a royal salute. The trumpeter and horse holder rides immediately behind the officers. Each gun and limber with a team of horses attached measures 54 feet in length. Pulled by 6 horses, the near-side 3 are ridden, whilst the 3 on the offside are held in hand by the near-side jockey, who's known as the driver. Spare time is always built into the schedule to ensure the troop are not late for their prestigious appointments. Just over halfway, the King's troop stop in a quiet square to give both the soldiers and horses a welcome rest. The opportunity to ensure that both the horses and riders remain in perfect condition is not missed, with hooves re-oiled and jackets cleaned. One of the more challenging undertakings for the police escort is negotiating the traffic-heavy Marble Arch. With the lease on the troop's present central London home in St. John's Wood coming to an end, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery are relocating to the Royal Artillery's historic home at Napier Lines, Woolwich. Located 15 miles away from central London, the horses will be loaded into boxes and driven to a staging area at another central London barracks to carry out state duties. 71 horses take part, and the officers and soldiers, wearing their spectacular full ceremonial dress uniforms, gallop into action. Watching the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery firing a royal salute is one of the most spectacular forms of ceremonial activity to be seen in London. For salutes in Hyde Park, the 6 guns form up in a line abreast. A salute of 41 guns is fired. Ceremonial days particularly involve long hours, with many in the King's Troop rising between 2 and 3 in the morning to prepare themselves, the horses and guns for the day ahead. And as the last round echoes across the park, the guns are hooked into their team of horses and once more gallop away before their ride back to St John's Wood Barracks. The gun teams enjoy their ceremonial roles, but rate going at speed as being their best experience. Pulling the cumbersome gun carriages can sometimes be hazardous for the horses, and injuries are inevitable. The veterinary team, along with the horse box, always travels with the King's Troop. This horse was badly injured on the rear leg and needed to be transported back to the barracks for urgent attention. Once back at St John's Wood, the horse was given an injection and underwent x-rays, but went on to make a full recovery. The first priority for the troop is to ensure that the horses are first fed and then groomed. But upon return from the hard work of a gun salute and the pulling of the heavy gun carriages, the secretions by the horse's skin glands are enormously increased, and removal must be assisted by artificial means. Otherwise, the pores of the skin will become clogged and the horse's health will deteriorate. After being wiped down with a damp cloth, the skin is cleaned with a good bristle brush, strongly applied, an action that requires both skill and hard labor. Clipping allows the horse to dry more quickly. Plus, it's easier to groom the horse and spot the first sign of any injury. Even the long hairs on the horse's chin are shaved. A tail left long and loose is likely to become straggly and unsightly. The troop's horses' tails are brushed and then expertly wrapped in a horse bandage. Without the natural conditioning factors present in the wild, the horse's teeth have to be filed down due to the built-up edges as they chew their food. Once the horses have been cared for, the soldiers then attend to their other duties, such as cleaning the guns and polishing the tack. Although many mounted King's Troop soldiers will tell you that the riding is tough, none will disagree that preparing all the kit and keeping it clean is the hardest part. Each gun is looked after by a limber gunner for their subsection. It's their responsibility to maintain the gun and ensure that the guns are always in peak condition for parade duties. In order for the King's Troop and others taking part in the trooping of the colour ceremony to be perfectly practiced, rehearsals, called the Major General's Review and the Colonel's Review, are scheduled on the Saturdays 2 and 1 week preceding the Queen's Birthday Parade respectively. The King's Troop attend these rehearsals in their best kit and undertake the exact same procedures as they do at trooping the colour, with of course the same grueling workload and early starts and late finishes for the soldiers. A midnight finish on a ceremonial day is an achievement, with a 1 AM finish not unheard of on these very important days. The King's Troop makes the grueling, almost hour-long ride, excluding stops, down to Horse Guards. Even in the most foul weather conditions, the King's Troop ride to their royal appointments. Wet weather means extra hard work and effort to restore the guns and other equipment back to tip-top condition upon their return to barracks. The massed bands take up position on the south side of the parade ground. Number 1 guard is referred to as the escort for the colour until it has collected the colour to be trooped. Only one colour can be trooped at a time, and the 5 household regiments take their turn each year. At precisely 10:34 AM, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery take up their position alongside the 2 regiments of the Household Cavalry, the Life Guards and the Blues and Royals, and the mounted bands. They form up behind number 1 to number 5 guards, either side of the Guards Memorial on the edge of St. James's Park. The 6 foot guard companies march on to Horse Guards parade via the Mall, preceded by regimental bands, and form an extended L shape around the perimeter of the square. This echoes the defensive formation known as the Hollow Square that in battle would have stood to protect the precious colour. Arriving precisely as the clock on the Horse Guards building strikes 11 o'clock, the Queen prepares to take the royal salute. The Queen first appeared at the parade when she was Princess Elizabeth as Colonel of the Grenadier Guards in 1947, the first ceremony to be held after the Second World War. Taking the royal salute in 1951, when she deputised for her father, King George VI, Her Majesty the Queen has attended Trooping the Colour in every year of her reign except 1955, when a national rail strike cancelled the event. The parade was first performed on the Sovereign's birthday for King George III in 1760, and throughout Queen Victoria's long reign, the Foot Guards performed this same ceremonial parade in honour of her birthday. The parade has continued to be held annually ever since, on a day set aside as the Sovereign's official birthday, with a few exceptions, notably the 2 World Wars. The Guards in the modern ceremony today are assembled in 2 ranks, a reminder of Wellington's tactics at Waterloo. A reminder also that these are soldiers who serve the Sovereign and nation when called upon to do so. Some 113 words of command are given by the officer in command of the parade. In 1998, the colour being trooped was the colour presented to the 1st Battalion Welsh Guards by Her Majesty the Queen on the 30th of May 1990. The Garrison Sergeant Major of London District, who's not mounted, coordinates the whole event on the parade ground and the approach road from the Mall. The custom of trooping the colour dates back to the reign of King Charles II. Because the colours of a regiment were visible above the smog and filth of battle, they were used as a rallying point. The ensigns with their colours were slowly marched between the soldiers' ranks every day to ensure that every man could recognise those of his own regiment. In London, the Foot Guards used to do this as part of their daily guard mounting on horse guards, and the ceremonial proceedings of the modern Trooping the Colour parade are along similar lines. Each year, one of the Foot Guards regiments is selected to troop their colour through the ranks of guards. They take their turn for this honour in rotation, as operational commitments permit. First off, the mounted troops perform a walk march. The King's Troop are given the distinction of being first to do so, before even the household cavalry. Formed for over half a century, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery is seen in this appearance on horse guards during Her Majesty the Queen's birthday parade on the 13th of June 1998. In the British Army order of precedence, the lifeguards are always listed first and always parade at the extreme right of the line. However, when the King's Troop, which forms part of the household troops, is on parade with its guns, the King's Troop takes the right of the line, meaning that they take precedence over all other regiments in the regular forces of the British Army. Along with all guns of the Royal Regiment of Artillery, the troops' guns are their colours and are granted the same respect as the embroidered colours of other regiments. Marching to the Royal Artillery slow march, the King's Troop roll forward their guns in 3 sections. When the King's Troop passes the saluting base, the Queen acknowledges their leading gun as their colour. Salutes are given to the Queen and returned by her and the Royal Colonels to the colours as they pass by. The household cavalry, made up of the Lifeguards and the Blues and Royals, walk past. A mounted state trumpeter of either of the 2 household cavalry regiments plays the trot to signal the beginning of the trot past by the mounted guards. The King's Troop pass by again, this time in a sitting trot. The Keel Row is traditionally played. Having completed 2 circuits of Horse Guards Parade, the King's Troop departs to fire a royal salute in Green Park, adjacent to Buckingham Palace, at 1 p.m. The Household Cavalry then leaves Horse Guards Parade, and each guard forms into 2 divisions, in preparation for the march to Buckingham Palace. The final royal salute is given. Led by the field officer, the colour of No. 1 Guard is lowered to the ground by the ensign. After the salute, he then rides towards the saluting base, informing the Queen that the Guards are ready to march off Horse Guards Parade. The 1,400 officers and soldiers who were on parade, together with over 100 horses and the 400 musicians from 10 bands, are led back down the Mall to Buckingham Palace. The markers then march off, carrying the regimental company colours on the marker flags. On the day of trooping the colour, the Royal Standard is flown from Buckingham Palace and from Horse Guards Building. The King's Troop, having left the trooping of the colour slightly earlier than the rest of the Household Division, travel down the Mall and enter Green Park to prepare for their 1 p.m. 41-gun salute. Without doubt, the gun salute is a mark of respect. But the origins of the salute and the principle for the number of different guns fired as royal salutes remains unclear. The Admiralty claims that when a man of war was visiting a foreign port, it would discharge all its guns to show that they were empty, and thus indicate friendly intentions, because the ship's company would not have enough time to reload the cannons before coming into the range of the shore batteries. The 41-gun salute consists of a 21-gun salute with an additional 20 rounds fired because the gun position is in a royal park. Nobody knows why 21 guns should be fired, but an explanation put forward by the War Office was that it was the next odd number after 19, which is the number of salutes fired at field marshals and admirals' funerals. Another suggestion for the firing of 41 guns in royal parks was that it was 21 for royalty and 20 for the Duke of Westminster. However, this idea has been rejected as unrealistic. 41 guns also appears to be the number fired exclusively in St James's Park, Green Park, Hyde Park and at the Tower of London. With a recuperating mechanism along the top of the barrel of the gun, once fired, the considerable recoil was absorbed by the recuperator, stopping the gun carriage moving offline. This meant that the gun didn't require realignment after each round was fired. The men and women of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery work hard, enthralling the public at events throughout the country. They're proud to be the British Army's youngest mounted regiment, and Her Majesty the Queen's mounted ceremonial saluting battery at that. With a clearly defined role in the continuation of Britain's historic military traditions, the troop does not lose sight of its 21st century obligations to maintain an operational presence in theatres of war around the world. But without such gloriously rich military units to deliver the pomp and colour of traditional ceremonial events, the British Army, the monarchy and Great Britain would lose something irreplaceable. Long may the King's Troop and British military tradition continue.